Today, great. Okay, my name is Nancy Carvajal. I come from Universidad Pedagógica y Tecnológica de Colombia in the Andean region. And I'd like to start, and I thank Paula for allowing me to start this space by acknowledging our ancestors. I come from the Muisca people in the Andean region, and I would also like to honor all the ancestors of every person who's present here today. And I'm just gonna want to share a song that speaks to the heart, hopefully, of everyone who's listening, hearing here in this space. So that's what the song is about. It's speaking to the heart of our brothers and sisters, and a reminder that at the end of the day, we are just that, like brothers and sisters who have different walks in life and who have developed some understandings. And today what we're gonna be sharing in this panel is some of the understandings we have developed on this earth, let's say. Okay. Tamborcito, tamborcito, ayúdame a cantar. Tamborcito, tamborcito, ayúdame a cantar. Para que salga mi voz, para que salga mi voz, para que salga mi voz y que llegue a donde tenga que llegar, al corazón de mi hermano, al corazón de mi hermana, al corazón de este pueblo, al corazón, al corazón. Thank you.
Buenos días. I'm going to be speaking Spanish and English so that we all understand, we all are closer to an understanding of our conversation here. So this conversation, esta conversación es una forma de cerrar, una semana intensa, de diálogo, y creo que es una forma muy bonita de hacerlo. In this conversation, we're gonna have closure to a week-long conversation with colleagues and friends coming from different parts of the world. And again, thank you for coming to Colombia, Medellin, and our university, and also thank you guys in my research group. I really appreciate from the bottom of my heart what you've done this week. So I would like to start this dialogue, and I have to warn my colleagues, Luanda and Adriana, that this conversation is very much outside of that structure of typical academic events. This is conversation, and I would like to use a word that I'm trying to coin in my discourse that's very local, and that's conversa. It's not like conversation. It has a different meaning. Conversa it's more local. So this is what we're gonna have, a conversa. Talking about that, I would like to go back to something that I was discussing a few minutes ago with Ari, concerning how in the South we are, and particularly the ones within the language education area, we have a discourse shift, and also that reflects an ideological shift. The ones of us who were educated in the North, ese no fue tu caso, Luanda, pero en el caso nuestro, de los que fuimos educados en el sur, en el norte global, those of us who were educated in the global north, and particularly in the field of language teaching, are pretty much influenced by Eurocentric views. And lately, I'm very fortunate to live this moment in my country and in my field, how this is, how there is a shift. And I don't know if the best word is a shift. It feels like an earthquake, more in my field. As we connect, and this is like my big lesson of the week, how we're connecting to our roots. And I think this connects pretty well with your movie, Shirley. This need, as we connect to our roots, we connect to nature. It's a way to connect to others, to nature, to the world, as we try to save ourselves as species. In our field, and particularly here, you can go back, and here I'm talking to the people who have been sharing with over this week. There are some words that have been present in our improvised interpretations from our friends, words like territory and territorial education, weaving, which is very much part of this going back to our roots. The word that I just used, conversa, that is similar to like a conversation. It feels like a cozy conversation. Dialogue of knowledges, and the word circle that you guys translated as a talking circle. Words like that, and the fact that we are appropriating these concepts, the words and the concepts that they embed reflect our connection to our roots, and this bridging between global north and global south epistemologies. And I think this week is a symbol of that. In our dialogues during the week, these concepts were present. For example, when we were learning with La Profesora Ana Lucia on Monday, profesora from the Pedagogy of Modern Earth, and also with Professor Hugo Huitrago in the Peace Program, and also with Professor Doris Adriana Ramirez from the U Inclusive Program. Those of you who had the opportunity to be there, also with Don Carlos in the Organic Farm, in the Comuna 13 with Casa Colacho. So there are all these experiences that show how communities are struggling to go back to their roots. And in talking about this going back to our roots, this conversation feels very relevant. How critical pedagogies and work on decoloniality fit together, how they speak to each other, and that's why we're here with our colleagues. Since this doesn't fit the protocol of typical academic events, I'm going to ask my colleagues to tell us about them and to tell us about their work on critical pedagogies, like their trajectories on critical pedagogies and decoloniality. Let's start with Luanda. So Luanda speaks Portuguese and Spanish. She's going to be speaking Portuguese or Spanish? Spanish. Okay, Spanish. So we have plenty of interpreters here. And what we've done during this week is like a shared interpretation. So Autumn Joy, if you will maybe give me a hand later, like if there's something that I'm missing, or my colleagues here who also speak English and Spanish, I think that's something that we can share.
Thank you. Pues good morning, bom dia, buenos días. Yo soy colega de la profesora Paula y la profesora Adriana González. Soy licenciada en idiomas por Brasil, soy del sur de Brasil. trabajo y mi maestría y mi doctorado son en lingüística aplicada. Vengo trabajando hace muchos años con el campo de New Literacy Studies, los estudios de literacidades o cultura escrita, y con muchas preguntas sobre la decolonialidad. Les preparé como una conversación para contar un poco cómo empiezo a conversar con Freire, y creo que los libros estén así es un buen ejemplo de cómo sigo conversando y volviendo a conversar con él. Sí, por favor. ¿Quién va a traducir esto?
Menos mal, tantas hablamos inglés. And so Luanda, she's a Brazilian. She's from South Brazil, and she has been educated within a literacy framework. She is going to be sharing our conversation, departing on the work on Freire, having Freire as the point, as a starting point. Is there anything else that we want to summarize from there?
Confío en usted.
Ay, Dios.
Entonces, cuando yo recibí esta invitación, pensé en contarles hoy sobre cuándo me conecto con Freire, cuando hay esta conexión allí, y pienso que de algún modo eso que preparé responde a la primera pregunta que ustedes habían planteado sobre cuál ha sido el impacto de las pedagogías críticas en nuestra trayectoria académica. Entonces,
Okay, so she will start answering one question that we shared before, and that's how critical pedagogies have impacted her academic trajectory. And she will start talking about how she connects to Freire.
Gracias. Entonces, en el primer momento, esta conexión se dio con un diálogo con mi tutora de tesis, que es una maravillosa educadora chilena que está radicada en Brasil, y deben saber que Paulo Freire ha vivido un buen tiempo en Chile. Ella, Angela Kleiman, tenía claro que nuestro campo de investigación, los New Literacy Studies, o estudios do letramento en Brasil, tenían en sus bases la obra de Freire, sobre todo Pedagogía del Oprimido, como uno de los que más va a tener impacto, es de los libros más traducidos de Freire y muy citados pues, en nuestro campo. Luego de ahí, llego en Colombia. ¿Sí pasa? Hablo tres tiempos y ya puedo resumir. Luego, durante la pasantía doctoral, que es cuando llego a Colombia, en 2013 más o menos, me doy cuenta que nunca había escuchado tanta gente hablar de Freire. Entonces los eventos citaban a Freire, reportaban a su obra, más que mi experiencia en Brasil, siendo Paulo Freire brasileño. No demoró a darme cuenta que eso también era un impacto de la colonialidad y de esta invisibilidad hacia el sur global, ¿no? O sea, cómo vamos invisibilizando a los autores del sur. Entonces yo cito más bien a Giraud, o Giraud, como quieran decir, que a Paulo Freire. Entonces ahí también esta discusión de la colonialidad ayudaba a entender. Y el tercer paso fue cuando ya, como docente ocasional en la Facultad de Educación, dicté el curso de pedagogías críticas, más o menos entre 2015 y 2016, y era un curso liderado por quien fue mi tutora de la pasantía, la profesora Zaida Sierra, en un proyecto de ruralidad, equidad y diversidad. Entonces, articuladas las discusiones de ruralidad, de los retos de la Colombia, en asumir su Colombia profunda, allí discutíamos a Freire. Y fue una bellísima oportunidad de volver a reencontrarme y leerlo con mucho más detalle, detenimiento en mis cursos. Entonces, y luego de ello, ya un curso que dicté en el posgrado en educación sobre Freire, pero ya como en 2020, mucho tiempo después, ya había tenido más oportunidad de conversar con él. Y la verdad es que ha sido una experiencia pues muy placentera, esta reconexión con Freire a partir de otras voces y voces extranjeras a mi territorio o a nuestro territorio.
Okay, so you help me here if I'm missing something important. Luanda tells us about her work, her relationship with Freire since because it was your thesis, era tu asesora de tutoría, la de tutoría era la maestría.
Y del doctorado.
Bueno, al principio, la chilena. So she had a Chilean advisor for her thesis in the master's program and in the doctoral program, Angela Klagman. And this was focused on literacy studies, which, as you know, have a very strong basis on the work of Freire, of Paulo Freire. And of course, particularly the work in pedagogy of the oppressed. During her doctoral, I forgot the word, internship, thank you. During her doctoral internship in Colombia in 2013, she realized that when she came here, she had never heard about Freire so much as she did here. This didn't happen in Brazil. And this is funny because I had the same experience in the US. And she attributes this invisibility of Freire's work in Brazil to colonial practices, the impact of coloniality and the invisibility in the global South of Southern authors like Paulo Freire. And here, like how we, in this global South side, authors from the global South like Giroux, she provided, that's the example that she gave. So her work, not only as a doctoral intern, right? Postdoctoral. Okay. As a doctoral intern in Colombia, made her realize about this invisibilization of Latin American authors. Then she offered a course on critical pedagogy in 2015, 2016, and you participated in a project about equity. Es un proyecto sobre equidad.
Ruralidad.
And rurality. With Professor Hugo Huitrago. Some of you met Professor Hugo Huitrago from the Peace Program. And later on, she offered a course in the graduate program about Freire, and that has been a very pleasant experience. Am I missing anything? Most of it? Okay. What reactions do you have to that? There's a word that Shirley uses that's provocation, and I bet that your answers are provocations to generate other ideas about the ideas you already built around this question of what has been the impact of critical pedagogies in your academic trajectory. Should we continue with you, Adriana? So you tell us who you are, and then your answer.
Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias, bom dia, bonjour. Thank you so much for being here with us. And thank you, Paula, Ana, and her research group, and all of you for trusting Paula and her research group and coming and visiting us. We know how hard it is to fight some of the stereotypes and some of the stories about Medellin and Colombia. Usually I would start telling my academic training, but this time I was thinking how I should introduce myself. And I want to start saying that I am the daughter of Gilberto and Nelly, two Colombian people, lower class, working class people who never finished high school, but were very, very in love with reading, writing, and especially my father. I became a foreign language teacher and a language lover because of him. So when Nancy said, let's thank our elders, maybe it's the time for me to thank again my lovely father, who never spoke a word of English or French or Italian, but who exposed me to opera in different languages. And that's how I became in love with languages. And so this is a fantastic opportunity to pay tribute to those who encouraged me. My mother she was a rebellion in the 60s. She got married when she was 30 years old, when people get married very, very early. She decided to have 2 kids. We were 3, but her sisters had 9, 10, 11 kids. She took pills against the Catholic Church, and she was a very open-minded, she was a rebellion, and I think I have a little bit of her, and I'm very happy because I got her seed in my heart and in my mind. Well, I'm a teacher. I have been an English and French teacher for many, many years, and I have been honored to be a teacher from preschool to doctoral programs. As a Colombian, heterosexual, middle-class woman, I am honored to be now a professor. I have 2 brothers, both have 1 kid each one. I am not married, and I'm happily single. As someone who I remember now is, okay, we have here Josh Lerner, who's an American friend. He's related to Professor Andrew Cohen from the University of Minnesota. Some of you may have heard about him. He taught me many years ago that I was a career woman, and that expression stick to my head. So this is who I am, and now I'm a professor at the School of Languages. I teach in the undergraduate program, in the master's program, and recently in the doctoral program with Paula and Ana Maria in the research line in multilingualism, culture, and education. That's who I am. Should I start answering the question? Okay. As Paula said, well, I'm the product of 3 countries' education. I did my undergraduate program in Colombia, my master's degree in France, and my doctoral degree at Stony Brook, State University of New York at Stony Brook. And for as long as I remember, languages have been my passion. And as a product of these global North colonial practices, one of the key interests in my life was to sound as a native speaker. And I always felt so happy when people told me, your French is so beautiful, you sound like someone from the south of France. Or in the US, when they told me if I was an American resident or whatever. And when they asked me where you learned your English, I said Colombia. And like, Colombia? Well, my English is from Colombia, from this university. And after time passed, I came to realize these issues of power, especially translated into native speakerism. All of us who come from the global south, we have a very long fight against the academic privileges of the global north, and how many events are done in the times the global north decides, in the places the global north decides. And many people do not consider that many of us need a visa, something as simple as that, or that we cannot afford the registration fees to the events of the global north. So, and this has been my latest work on connecting the privileges of the global north in academia and the discrimination against non-native speakers of English in various forms of power. I became interested in critical pedagogy after I came back from the United States. And I began working with some colleagues, Paula, Jaime, Usma, Ana Maria Sierra, Doris Correa, and we created a master's program with a critical stance. After that, and they were younger than me, they are younger than me, and they had a more critical approach in their doctoral programs in the US. I come from a pure linguistics doctoral program, and through learning and reflecting, I became aware of the inequalities and how I could be a critical teacher educator, especially talking from my own experience. When I found my voice and I realized that I didn't have to be part of this privilege, and I could be myself, and I could be Colombian, and I could be whoever I wanted to be, finding my voice and my place gave me the insight to explore other areas. I'm sorry, I was too long. Sorry.
Okay, so I got an issue with labels. So when I got into my doctoral program at Washington State and they asked me to identify myself, the only definition that still defines me today is human being under construction. So that's a messy process. So watch out. No, just kidding. No, it is a messy process. But anyways, so for my group, my research group, we came across Paulo Freire in 2008. And then we came across Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and this idea of taking action as part of praxis, being in constant reflection and action is the principle that has accompanied our work till this day. So back in the day then, that resonated with our hearts because we were saying like, hey, like we are not just meant to be like these teachers that are transmitting knowledge, teaching a foreign language or even teaching our mother language, but also to find a space for transformation of our own selves first, and then communities transformation. So we started volunteering for an NGO, a local NGO that works with displaced youth and children. And then the members of the group were only 5 or 6, and then we needed more hands. So we decided to start a volunteer program at the university in the languages school, and then we could have 70 volunteers coming on weekends to work with displaced youth and children from different parts of the country for a period of 2 years. So this was an amazing opportunity for us because we were reading all these critical thinking pedagogies and critical literacies and what that meant for us, but we were also like in the building of our own identities as not only as professionals, but personal identities. So then when we came across this reality and we could work with youth and children, we realized that one of our biggest accomplishments was at the end of a 3-month work with children and youth was to get one child to smile. So that was part of our experiences. So when we saw a child smiling at the end of the training of the language, so we said, oh, so this is what it is about, right? It's not about teaching the language. It's just about exchanging with kids and children so that the language becomes an excuse, becomes a resource, so that they can feel that they belong somewhere and that they can resignify their realities, and we can learn from that experience of their own realities, and that we were also transformed. So this was a transformational processes at different levels. It was for the children and youth, it was for the NGO itself, but it was also for our own selves and our own work. So we have like 3 layers of transformation. So from there on, so we decided, hey, how are we gonna name the group, right? So what's gonna be the name of our research group? So then what made sense to us back in the day, and it still does today, is knowledge in action. So for us, it is very important to stay grounded by working with the communities, right? And by building bridges with the communities, right? So because that keeps us grounded and that gives us perspective that academia is not just considering that we are to theorize and publish and make presentations removed from the understanding of the real life struggles, right? So we need to be on the streets, we need to be on the countrysides, we need to be, like with different communities that are minoritized or that are discriminated, because that's where the real understanding of what we get is the sense of Paulo Freire is about, right? So Paulo Freire also taught us how to work with the peasants and how to teach them how to read and write. It was not just because he wanted them to read and write, but because literacy was an opportunity for them to defend their own rights, right? So what Paulo Freire is inviting us to do is, hey, let's use our tools to serve. So service has been at the core of our critical actions, and that has been transformational for the ways we think of ourselves, being, daughters and sons of peasants ourselves, having experienced different kinds of violences, ourselves that comes from sexism and classism and homophobia. So the members of my research group, we have all experienced all these violences. So we wanted to tune up our voices and to allow other people that we work with to find a venue and a space to tune their voices up, right? So that's where I feel connected to what you were presenting this morning. So what you're doing with your doctoral studies on identity is tuning up your own voices and ways of doing research, and also offering a venue for other people to tune their voices up. So that's part of our journey, and hopefully I will share some other insights.
Sí, yo veo una presencia muy fuerte de la voz propia y de la identidad propia en las intervenciones de ustedes. Y yo diría que como una forma de encontrar un camino hacia uno mismo, ¿cierto? Y que se convierte en un proceso muy empoderador cuando se hace lo mismo por otros, como lo mostraban las presentaciones de los candidatos a doctorado hace un rato que nos hicieron una presentación. I just said something like, or in the lines of, having something like a common thread, and that's finding our own voices in this work and in my colleagues' work, and how it takes you to finding yourself in the path. La siguiente pregunta tiene, yo creo que la han venido respondiendo, y es con esos caminos que ustedes han visto que las pedagogías críticas han tomado en América Latina. ¿Ustedes cómo ven ese yo lo llamaba un trasegar, ese trasegar de las pedagogías críticas, particularmente cuando nos vemos en un contexto de un giro decolonial? The next question is something in the lines of, which I think Adriana, Luanda, and Nancy have already answered to a little, and that's what in their view characterizes the transfer, or not transfer, but the walking, we would use in our current Spanish in Universidad de Antioquia, the walking of critical pedagogies in Latin America. Particularly in this current context of where it is more evident to see this decolonial turn. So what characterizes probably transformation of critical pedagogies, how we are bringing it into concretion, into life in Latin America. So would you like to start, Nancy?
Okay, what has happened with my personal growth is that we started with thinking about action and service while being in Colombia. Then I had the opportunity to conduct my doctoral program in Washington State University that is also landed or built on the lands of the Nez Perce people, indigenous peoples. And then I got enrolled into this cultural studies and social thought in education program, through which I could come closer to Chicana Latino feminisms and indigenous knowledges. So when I started reading one very powerful book, so I have already read A Gloria Saldúa as part of my master's program here in Colombia, but then I had the opportunity to read her while being in the United States. So being away from my country allowed me to face a reality of getting my identity being questioned all the time, you know? So where is your accent from? What are you doing here? Why didn't you study in your country? Oh, what are the kinds of drugs that you consume? You know, when they heard where I was coming from, right? I got questions like, when I was saying that I was from Colombia, they said, oh, but aren't Shakira and Sofia Vergara from Colombia? And then I said, yes. And then they said, oh, so then you're not from Colombia. So my identity and who I was being questioned from my physical appearance, from the ways that I talk, from the clothing that I wear, from the place of origin that I was coming from. So I can tell you that it was a very powerful, enriching opportunity for me to look back to who I was, right? And to try to provide some of the answers, not all of them, because I was not interested in probably debunking of, you know, like engaging all the time in certain kinds of questions and answers. But it was an opportunity. One of the other questions that I got is, why do you engage in all these volunteer programs? Why are you in the farmers market? Why are you going to the shelter? Why are you, working with the library and the children's, program? And then I didn't have an answer for that, right? Like I say, like, I don't know, I'm passionate about it. I feel that I want to learn. I want to learn from the community by being with the community, right? So I didn't go to the States just to stay inside the university, and get to read books. No, my experience was being with the community to get a sense of the place. So what was Pullman like? What was Washington State University about? What was the dynamics that was moving around the university? And what could I learn from myself and these dynamics when I came back to Colombia? So when I started to be questioned about all these things, and I say, okay, so I don't know about the community part. I don't know. So let's think for a while. And then I came across, these stories of my parents being leaders in the rural areas, and my grandparents, like organizing youth workers to defend their rights, and then my mom at church, like, being at service of many different people. And I say, probably part of the answer is coming from there. Part of the answer might have been coming from my own personal experience with oppression, having been oppressed, by my own family members who had like a higher position. So then they were like mistreating us because we were poor, my brothers and my parents and siblings. So I say, oh, probably is that sense of discomfort with our own family, where this need to offer a space to welcome people that is coming from, right? And I also had like, a near-death experience. So probably, maybe that near-death experience like allowed me to change perspective about what the purpose of life is, and I don't know. So when I was in Washington State, I came across this book, Fleshing the Spirit and Spiriting the Flesh. Fleshing the Spiriting and Spiriting the Flesh. So how these two nouns were turned into verbs, and how this collection of testimonials resembled pretty much the 1980s book, This Bridge Called My Back, edited by Gloria Saldú and Cherry Moraga. So this was a more recent testimonial book. And then I said, okay, if these women are writing from the very personal, and you know that one of the principles of feminism is that the personal is political. So then I said, if these women are writing in these ways, and indigenous scholars are bringing their stories and their wisdom. So then I was reading Linda Tuhiwe Smith and Margaret Kovach and Sean Wilson with Research is Ceremony. So then I was reading, oh my God, I was so fascinated that I allowed myself to really tune up my voice and start painting and start writing and start making sense of my own identity. So I think that for me, the critical view of transformation that Paulo Freire started or inspired in us was enriched or is enriched by this Chicano Latino feminist and indigenous scholars' idea of exploring identities and using that place as a place of self-transformation and community transformation as well. So what I do these days is combining the two. I mean, like, they walk with me all the time and with my research group. So we are working on identity construction on many different levels. We are embracing our mind, body, and spirits in everything that we do. I have been working with the Maya principle in Lakech, which means you are my other self. And if I hurt you, I hurt myself. But if I love you and respect you, I love and respect myself. So I've been working and developing, of course, more understandings. And there's more pieces to that, but by now I will just share this little piece of how I see that for me, the two have offered me opportunities to think of transformation, service, and being grounded on that, and then also giving ourselves the opportunity to do the self-healing, self-growth, and enrich this criticality by also paying attention to our own selves and other selves, identity construction processes.
Me gusta mucho esa pregunta y creo que tendría respuesta distinta desde Brasil y desde Colombia, lo que me parece aún más interesante, ¿no? Voy a responder desde, primero, poniendo un punto importante en la universidad. Creo que la creación de la línea de estudios interculturales en la maestría y doctorado en educación ha sido un punto muy importante. Y es una línea que se crea, digamos que en el contexto de creación de la licenciatura en Pedagogía de la Madre Tierra. Ahí la propia creación de la línea, las conversaciones con muchos autores del campo decolonial, es como un punto para mí bastante importante allí. Y voy a hablar desde mi experiencia en un grupo de estudios que tengo con colegas de Brasil, de la Universidad Federal de São Paulo, que es el grupo de estudios en estudios de literacidad y decoloniales. Entonces, el primero, en relación a ese trasegar de las pedagogías críticas en Latinoamérica y el giro decolonial, no puedo hablar sin pensar en la apuesta del grupo Modernidad-Colonialidad. O lo que hoy hablamos de los estudios decoloniales, por así decir, pero hay un principio allí de un grupo de estudios, modernidad, colonialidad, que incluye un gran número de intelectuales de Colombia, además, ¿no? Que muchos están en Estados Unidos. Y allí citaría a Arturo Escobar, pensando todo el tema del desarrollo, a Santiago Castro Gómez, desde la filosofía, pensando temas de la híbris, del punto cero y la colonialidad del saber, y el propio Eduardo Restrepo, más del campo antropológico. Pero este campo se nutre de teóricos de las pedagogías críticas, obviamente, y ahí pensaría en el pedagogo Paulo Freire, pero también en el psicanalista Franz Fanon, que es una referencia muy importante para los que trabajamos con decolonialidad. Podría pensar allí también Albert Memmi y otros que tienen una apuesta de criticar o repensar el legado de la colonización. O sea, la colonización nos deja un legado epistemológico, simbólico y estructural. ¿Cuáles son sus consecuencias? ¿Cuáles son sus implicaciones? Y esta es la pregunta clave para mí que se hace el grupo Modernidad-Colonialidad de una perspectiva transdisciplinaria, que va más allá de los estudios culturales, por ejemplo, de donde me formo yo, pensando más el campo simbólico, literario, lingüístico, del lenguaje, pero también va a preguntar por la economía y la política, los trabajos de Arturo Escobar, por ejemplo, por el desarrollo, por lo simbólico. Entonces creo que hay una conversación un poco más amplia disciplinarmente. Y te paso para terminar.
Wow.
Lo puedo hacer en portugués.
Again, this is when you say, I cannot be an interpreter. It's very, I admire very much the work of interpreters and translators. I am not one. So please apologize. I apologize. It's interesting how, well, but I still wonder, algo que dijiste, que tendríamos una respuesta a esta pregunta de ese trasegar de las pedagogías críticas en Brasil y en Colombia, cómo podrían ser, esto cómo tiene preguntas distintas, es algo que, bueno, ahora nos cuentas, pero Luanda was saying that this has to do with her own path in critical pedagogies. She started saying that to the question of what has been, in their view, this transformation or how is the presence of critical pedagogies in Latin America, she says that there would be different answers in Colombia and in Brazil. And that's something that she's going to elaborate on later. She was telling us about the work of her research group. Your research group is Modernidad y Decolonialidad. Modernity and decoloniality. And she described this process of creation of cultural, or the integration of cultural studies in the graduate programs in the Faculty of Education, in our College of Education, that have been greatly influenced by this undergraduate program that that the folks who visited us from abroad already know, Pedagogy of Mother Earth. And of course, she told us about this study group that she has with colleagues from the University of Federal Sao Paulo, where they have drawn on the work of Arturo Escobar, Santiago Castro Gomez, Eduardo Restrepo, whose work have been influenced by critical pedagogies, and whose work is a critique, and in their work they ask us to rethink the legacy of colonialization and the consequences and the implications of coloniality in our work today. Is there anything I'm missing, colleagues? From
Lo retomo ya. Entonces, cuando llegan así que las pedagogías críticas ya tenían mucha trayectoria desde la profusión fuerte en los años 60, 70, cuando llega el giro decolonial, que es más o menos entre los años 1980, 90, en América hispana. Porque en Brasil señalo que tiene otro trayecto y ha llegado más tarde, por lo menos, la noción de colonialidad, coloniality, de Aníbal Quijano, del sociólogo peruano Aníbal Quijano. Yo aquí citaría otra vez Franz Fanon y Catherine Walsh, que del grupo de modernidad colonialidad, para mí es la única pedagoga, la que tiene preguntas por educación del grupo de los estudios decoloniales. Y ha sido amiga de Paulo Freire, ha trabajado con Freire, es de Estados Unidos, tienen como esta relación. Si yo fuera a definir, bueno, y respondo a la pregunta que me decías de esas diferencias, que para mí tiene que ver con las vertientes críticas o de discusiones críticas que cada país asume. Entonces, en Brasil tenemos una pregunta muy fuerte y campos de estudio sobre el racismo. O sea, racism es un tema central para nosotros en Brasil. Los estudios de género tienen otro trayecto, mientras en Colombia hay una discusión para mí mucho más fuerte sobre paz, sobre desarrollo, proyectos de desarrollo. Entonces, estas temáticas también dan otras nuances para la recepción de esa discusión decolonial. Lo que hablaríamos como colonialidad muchas veces, y esta noción de Quijano, de pensar sobre cómo la noción de raza genera deshumanización y humanización es tan central, en Brasil vamos a hablar de raza, o sea, de race. Entonces, eso ahí hace con que demoramos mucho más para también hablar de colonialidad. Si yo fuera a definir, ¿cierto? Y tomaría las palabras de Gijó para pensar esas pedagogías críticas de América Latina, me gustaría pensarlas como este compromiso pedagógico, y aquí lo cito en un libro que me gusta mucho de Kincheloe y McLaren, sobre pedagogías críticas, de qué hablamos, dónde estamos. Ellos dicen que sería este compromiso pedagógico que llega hasta el corazón, el tema del corazón que me parece también tan importante y que hablábamos ahora, de lo que significa abordar las desigualdades reales de poder en lo social y concebir la educación como un proyecto, y un proyecto para la democracia y para la ciudadanía crítica, sin dejar de subrayar toda una serie de cuestiones importantes que muchas veces se pasan por alto, como por ejemplo, por qué como educadores y educadoras hacemos las cosas como hacemos, de la manera en que las hacemos, que es una pregunta por lo obvio: ¿cómo hacemos lo que hacemos y por qué lo hacemos? ¿A qué intereses sirve la educación superior o la educación básica y rural? ¿A qué noción de desarrollo nos enfrentamos? ¿A qué nociones de multilingüismo y de lengua subyace en nuestra práctica pedagógica? ¿Cómo es posible comprender y encajar los diversos contextos en los que tiene lugar la educación? Las pedagogías críticas no son solo Paulo Freire, pero en la otra parte sí quisiera retomar algunas nociones que traigo con Freire en mi práctica docente. Y allí está la visión de la docencia como un acto de amor, de estudio, pero de curiosidad epistemológica, que es una noción que me parece muy bonita. La percepción de las desigualdades y la noción de educación bancaria, como algo que está a servicio de manutención de las desigualdades. La capacidad de velar y de construir, y ahí esta noción de lo crítico, ¿no? De cómo develo allí las relaciones de poder que están imbricadas en la práctica. Y la noción de inédito viable, que es de las que me parecen más bonitas, porque es en su corazón, en su cerne, la capacidad de transformación, o cuando nos abrimos para la capacidad de poder transformar la realidad en que estamos.
It's like, what? Okay, again, I'm not an interpreter. I'm gonna summarize in English some of the of my dear Luanda's words. So at the beginning, you were talking about like when critical pedagogies, like how decolonial theories on decoloniality arrived later on after critical pedagogies had already how we had already drawn on critical pedagogies in Latin America. You mentioned that there is an influence of well, that every country assumes different versions of what criticality is, depending on, of course, on their experience. So in Brazil, for example, the critical work is highly influenced by notions of racism, while in Colombia there is a stronger focus on peace work and work on concerning development. Okay, so you were also drawing on the work of Quijano and also on the work of the book by Peter McLaren and Joe Kinchelow on critical pedagogies. Where are we now?
¿De qué hablamos?
Where are we talking? I forgot the name of that book in English.
Sí, yeah.
And you were highlighting from that book what it means to build an education as a project to build critical citizenship. Why we teachers do what we do, what interests education serves, how, and you were also explaining how critical pedagogies are not, is not limited to Freire's work, but you were highlighting a few concepts that he addresses in his work, like love and I'm trying to remember the concept in English, epistemologic curiosity, and the importance of unveiling relationships of power.
Educación bancaria, banking education.
Oh yeah, banking education.
Lo crítico. Y el inédito viable. Que no sé.
Inédito viable.
O inédito viável da pedagogia da esperança.
Yes, from pedagogy of hope, but I can't remember how you say. Okay, now I'm gonna give the mic to Adriana.
Okay, critical pedagogy has meant many things to many people, and how we make the turn is very interesting into decolonial approaches or decolonial practices and discourses. Probably when I began analyzing the language education policies in Colombia, this idea of bilingual Colombia, which I find is a horrendous way to impose English and to impose top-down different ways to learn, to teach, to test, to train teachers, educate teachers in the country. I have been very critical of the policy since 2007 with a famous article that I wrote on the professional development of teachers in Colombia between colonial discourses and local practices. And I used the word colonial, and I didn't really know exactly what I meant. And but after reading and connecting to other people in Latin America, especially people from Brazil, I learned to expand these concepts. I belong to a collective of Global South critical teacher education, with in which we work every Friday. We get together. Today I am excused. I work with Valkyria Mochimor, Lin Mario Menezes de Souza, Clever da Silva, Rosani Pessoa, and others. So we work together, and connecting our concerns about language education policies has made us connect to other parts of this critical pedagogy. And more specifically, through the analysis of language education policies, I was acquainted with native speakerism that I mentioned already, and English as a lingua franca. So English as a lingua franca with the Brazilian touch, which is more political and it's more decolonial than the traditional English as a lingua franca framework from Europe. So I see that critical pedagogies, as we are embracing them, enacting them, and how we are contesting many of those colonial practices and the education we have been through in Colombia and in many parts of the world, especially in the global south, we have made these connections challenging the traditions in academia. So one major thing is how we publish, how we get into publications, which is a very bumpy road for us who are not the native speakers of the language. And we are usually advised to hire professional proofreading services so that our English is better and well understood in certain spaces. And also publishing in our own languages. And this is something that I have learned from Brazilians. I barely publish in Spanish, and I feel ashamed because if I'm writing in English, I have always this idea of reaching people worldwide, but what about local fellow teachers who will not necessarily understand what I'm saying in English? So this has been a self-reflection that I have appreciated from my work with the Brazilian colleagues. So this is an important practice in the decolonial turn. So we need to use our own languages and connect, as Nancy said, connect to our communities. And there's also, I see this decolonial turn in the analysis of the varieties of English we expose people to, and in the acknowledgement of various forms of registers, of speakers, and different types of people who use languages. So we move from language learners to language users, which is something more democratic, and it's something more pluralistic. And this is a major thing that has allowed me and other colleagues to move into this critical pedagogy and decolonial turn. So finally, we think that critical language education policies connects to critical teacher education, critical language learning, critical professional development, critical applied linguistics, and we could be critical on many things. And it's a very good purpose of having this turn in Latin America and in Colombia. Many of us, and I know all of us who are here, and some of our graduate students and undergraduate students, we have understood that being critical means having a voice. And we have a very open agenda on using our own local references. So instead of always depending on the authors from the global north, we're taking good care, and this is a very personal practice that I have embraced for many years, is getting to know our own Colombian authors' work. because we know many people come as guest speakers, they come to our congresses, we talk to them, some of them look interested in our work, but once they leave Colombia, they never cite a Colombian author because they don't find the connection. So this is opening and reading more about other Latin American authors, other Colombian authors, people in Africa, and people from places where their voices aren't heard. Because there are a lot of stereotypes in academia. So usually when in those web of privileges, when you tell you're from Colombia, you know, besides everything we could talk about our stays in the US, for example, when you get to a Congress, people think, what do you do in Colombia besides Shakira, Sofia Vergara, Juanes, Maluma, and Pablo Escobar? I mean, someone from Colombia writing on critical pedagogy? And we also have our own hierarchies because we question sometimes, like someone from Bolivia or El Salvador or Nicaragua, because we have created scales. So we say, oh, Brazil, oh yes, fantastic. Chile or Mexico and now Colombia, we're now more evident. The same happens to people who are doing fantastic work in Africa. Do we know African scholars? So this is nice to meet you. And you do know more. So this is a fantastic opportunity to embrace critical pedagogy through other authors, non-native speakers who have made it. And of course, if we are multilingual, we should have the possibility of using other languages. And of course, being or making the global north monolingual English speaker, that there are many, many voices. And there's hope beyond English. I think this turn will definitely imply multilingualism, translanguaging, and diversity.
Gracias. Vamos a terminar con una pregunta de cierre. Les voy a pedir que se tomen un minuto en esa respuesta, una respuesta flash. Y esa pregunta es más hacia el futuro. Autumn, Joy o Tania, les voy a pedir esta vez su ayuda con la interpretación de la respuesta de Luanda, porque sé que harán un mejor trabajo que yo. Esta pregunta tiene que ver con cómo, a partir de estas experiencias y este trasegar, cómo ven el futuro de las pedagogías críticas, de esa presencia de las pedagogías críticas en América Latina. So this last question, and I asked them to give a very short answer, very concrete. How do you see the future of critical pedagogies in Latin America? So I think we can start with Luanda, and this time, Autumn Joy, Tania, which one? Autumn Joy is going to help me with the interpretation of Luanda's answer. Okay, yeah, Tania? Okay, so could you please translate Luanda's answer right after she finishes? No, Tania. Okay, you can begin.
Posso falar em português? Tá. Então, elas precisam desse microfone. Está funcionando. Pero igual aquí pueden hablar más durito. Sino que para a transmissão, para que escutem vocês. Ok, obrigada. E aí não tenho que estar no microfone. Então, rapidamente. Na América Latina, eu sinto que tem um profundo diálogo entre as pedagogias críticas, a educação popular e campos como a pesquisa, ação participativa e a sistematização de experiência, que são áreas que reconhecem o poder, a história ou a historicidade e as inequidades, né, ou desigualdades nessas práticas sociais, educativas ou não.
Não, ok. Para a próxima vez. Você quer... Oh, sorry. So she's talking about a dialogue between three things. And so I'm asking her to do more frequent pauses so I can translate between... Fala de novo, as três coisas. Diálogo entre...
Pedagogias críticas
Critical pedagogies.
e educação popular,
Popular education.
sistematização de experiências, sistematização de experiências
Systematization of experiences.
e a pesquisação participativa.
And critical action research, participatory action research.
E estas são áreas que reconhecem o poder, a historicidade das desigualdades,
These are areas that recognize the power and the history of
inequities
inequities
e o potencial de resistência dos
And-
atores sociais.
and the possibilities offered by resistance to authority.
Resistência e resistência.
Resistance and re-existence.
Por que é diferente? Porque na re-existence há poder criador, de
Because
criação.
within re-existence, there is the power of creation, creating something new.
Então, eu falaria que há apostas de programas de graduação e pós-graduação, inclusive na Colômbia, que são bons exemplos do que eu penso que seria essa resposta que poderíamos dar para o futuro.
So these graduate and postgraduate programs that exist, and especially here in Colombia, a última parte,
that would represent the kinds of things that she's talking about.
represent these possibilities.
E que são exemplos justamente do conceito de inédito viável.
Exactly, this concept that we're talking, this Freudian concept that we're not quite sure how to translate, the inédito viável.
I've translated it before, but I don't remember what I said, but basically it is something that is new and hasn't been tried, but it can happen. So it's like, yes.
Doable.
Yes, doable.
Que es cuando yo identifico mis desigualdades, las reconozco, veo que hay un potencial de crear, de transformar.
When I recognize mis dificuldades, the challenges, then I
Transformar,
can transform them, right? It is in recognizing the challenges that I enable myself to transform.
Because of the history. La historicidade, a história, a historicidade, ou como queremos dizer, o poder da história, que nunca é determinada.
So recognizing the truths of history, I am empowered.
Yes.
And that the power of history is not determining.
History is not what determines the future.
Yes. Isso é clave, é chave aí.
This is key.
3 exemplos.
For 3 examples:
Licenciatura,
undergrad,
pedagogia da Madre Terra,
the
vocês
pedagogy of
conheceram.
Mother Earth,
pela criação conjunta com organizações indígenas fora da universidade.
working together with indigenous organizations outside the university,
A licenciatura em educação básica primária,
education in early childhood education,
com ingresso especial para professores normalistas, professores com magistério,
so with
em território, em terreno.
okay, so special admission for people who are from certain criteria like normal schools,
Em áreas rurais.
which are public schools. Okay.
They are schools for teachers.
Okay.
E a pedagogia em ruralidade e paz,
Não escutei.
que é um programa, Pedagogia em Ruralidade e Paz, que é um programa interinstitucional e criado em conjunto com organizações camponesas para a área rural.
She mentioned this teacher training program that is coordinated with rural teacher education programs. Okay. Right, and non-university
E para
programs.
líderes, lideranças camponesas.
In
nas
order
áreas
to
rurais.
create leaders in the countryside.
In other words, an amazing array.
Well, the future is complicated, and I am half positive, half negative. Why positive? Because I see there's a lot of collegiality and a lot of networking among the global south. So the more we know other colleagues from other countries, especially from Latin America and Africa and Asia, so we get to see other voices. And I'm positive about those connecting and getting to know each other and getting to see new ways to construct, to teach languages, to educate teachers, and to appropriate those languages in society. I am also negative because I see the power of transnational agencies, and I see how language education policies are dominating the world, and how under the premises and the hopes of and the discourses of bilingualism and the myth of the bilingual nation, we are selling this future of being bilingual means being rich, powerful, successful, and it's not true, because bilingualism exists in most of our countries and it's just ignored and disregarded. Finally, I would say that our only option is just remember that the South also exists, as the famous poem by Eduardo Galeano. So we exist. Let's make it present in our everyday personal and professional practices. And probably, as the Chilean economist Max Neef said, when the only option is to become a mosquito cloud. When we are a cloud of mosquitoes is the only way we can fight a furious rhinoceros. If we fight, we cannot be a rhinoceros. But if we all get together and we become this mosquito cloud, we will drive him crazy. That's what we can do.
Well, in my case, I'm a dreamer, and then Eduardo Galeano speaks about this idea of utopia, that it makes sense because we are always trying to chase it, and we are after walking towards utopia. So I think that that's what we are doing. So I'm going to answer this question on the landscape of the sociocultural, political, historical reality that we are living worldwide and in Colombia. And then we are coming out, or we are not coming out, or we have a different situation from the pandemics, which has left us profound wounds in terms of education, in terms of our own selves. We are facing the different wars in Russia and Ukraine, and now what's going on in Palestine. Okay, so we cannot ignore that we are part of those realities as well. And then in Colombia in particular, we have a very important historical moment where for the first time in the history of our country, we have a progressive government with an African descendant female, woman in charge. We have a Ministry of Education that, at least in this discourse, is speaking about multiculturalism, interculturality, which is super powerful discourse because that could be translated potentially into policies, and it is already created and inflicting some changes in the ways teachers see and consider education. So that is the historical context part of the reading that I can do. But then one of the questions that in our particular field in English language teaching or ESL, we still need to get invested in is how do we understand coloniality, and therefore what is the colonial agenda that we are embarking on. Personally speaking, for me, coloniality has not only has to do with colonizing the lands, but also the bodies, the minds, and the spirits of people. So therefore, my decolonial agenda has been the result or the attempt to decolonize the self. So that is what I did on my dissertation, theorizing how to decolonize the self as expanding the agenda proposed by Chicano Latina feminists, by Black feminists, by indigenous scholars. So that's one angle of my decolonial agenda. The second angle has to do with decolonizing research. So also in my dissertation, in exploring housing instability and using Gloria Anzaldua's theories like Nepantla and the shadow beast to deconstruct identities. So I speak about the new normal. So I feel really connected to Alexis' presentation because I speak about a new normalcy, right? So the normal is not the binaries. The normal is the complexity and the intricacies of being and becoming, which is something that our brothers and sisters remind us. For indigenous scholars, so there are 7 generations before us that have built the path for us to be here today. Today, we will be the ancestors of the 7 generations that come. So if we behave and see ourselves as the future ancestors, and if we embrace and acknowledge our past ancestors, so that makes a difference in how we see and position ourselves. So part of my other decolonial contribution is decolonizing research when I speak about this 21st century neocolonial research condition. And I've been talking about this in many different fields. I was sharing with Ari that I've been talking to EdSci people and social workers in the UK and Canada. So this work of decolonizing research is something that speaks to all the fields. Finally, when returning to Colombia in 2018, I have been engaging in decolonizing teaching educational practices. So I have created 2 courses for undergrads, 2 courses for graduate students with these Chicano Latino feminist principles, with these indigenous principles. And all of this is contributed to decolonize pre-service teachers here in Colombia, training education programs. So I don't know, I see the present with a lot of potential. And what I see now is like this possibility of keeping on doing things, engaging in dialogues, and more importantly for me as a decolonial critical scholar is honoring the work of people who have come before us. We are not probably saying something new. What we are doing is sharing how the new ways in which we are connecting to these theories, we are resignifying our identities, and we are trying to contribute or expand some work that people have already done for us. The knowledge is out there. So we are coming to engage in dialogues with all the knowledge that is out there. So thank you so much.
So that was our final question. Esa fue nuestra pregunta final. Muchas gracias por haber estado aquí el día de hoy. I really thank you. Muchas gracias from the bottom of my heart to everyone, to the ones coming from Europe, from Canada, from the US. Thank you so much. I hope to see you again in the future and collaborating again in the future. And remember that there's a lot of love in Medellin, that you take a piece of us with you to your places, to your home. And well, thank you. Thank you very much to the people here supporting us with everything. Yes, Madam Chair.
So I wonder if anybody here would be interested in having like a spreadsheet with our emails, because I would love to be able to connect. And if you have projects you'd like to collaborate on, I would love to be a part. Obviously, the dissertation finished, but you know.
But after that.
After that, exactly. I kind of want to do everything.
I can actually share because I have everyone's emails. So.
And other scholars, it surely agrees.
If you agree. Thank you very much.